Hi, I'm the one-winged reman with another Let's Talk About. This time I wanted to really talk about cloning, because some of you people out there really love it when I talk about scientific stuff. So how about it? This topic is one of the topics that I'm really knowledgeable about. So let me go right to it. Let's start about the principles of cloning. Now, the cloning itself, in its rawest explanation, is the copying of an organic individual to another genetically identical individual. Notice genetical identical. Not in personality. I'll come back to that one later. Now, with that in mind, the process if for that to work, you need to place the genes and the DNA from the core, not just the core, but I'll get through that. The core, the DNA from the cells of the original, implanted in a pure blank cell. Typical, no, not just an egg cell, because just a stem cell. Yes, stem cell. That would be the best one to use. But here's the catch. The core DNA is not only the only DNA that matters in this matter. Because one thing is the factors outside of the cell, aka the intercellular factors, but there's also the intracellular factors, aka inside the cell itself. Because inside the cell, not only is there the core, but there's also organelles, aka little organs inside the cells, which make the cell work. And one of the organs, so to speak, organelles is the right term, that works well there, especially for the work of protein, which is the most important stuff in the human being. Heck, even in the organic being, gets processed through mitochondria. But the fact is that mitochondria is in fact inherited with the DNA of the mother, aka matriarchal DNA. So if you insert DNA into a stem cell with mitochondria already, you'll guarantee not having not even a 50% chance of having a genetically identical clone. Because the mitochondria, for you to understand this, I need to go through how a protein is worked. Because through the DNA sample, it can get split through DNases, enzymes called DNases. And from them, there can be copied via the process called transcription. There can be coded a line of messenger RNA that can be used later on in the process. But also, after the transcription, there's gonna be a translation of the messenger RNA string into protein. That's just the primary code, the primary structure of the protein. Then we come to how it's structured all together, how it's folded, how it's placed among other proteins. Those are the secondary, the tertiary, and the quaternary structure of the protein. And that process happens through mitochondria in the, I think it's called mitochondria. I think it is. But all dependable of what the structure of the mitochondria are. The structure of the proteins can be different, which in the end can mean a different effect of the protein itself. It can be for an enzyme, it can be for a muscle fiber, it can be for another organelle. That's all. But so for the cloning to exactly happen, you not only have to have a... Okay, now I'm gonna skip. I was right before. It's not a stem cell that's needed. That's an empty egg cell. The empty egg cell and the organelle, the mitochondrial, and the core from the original. Then through the process of meiosis, it can evolve into the being. But there, it's also the story of the flowers and the bee. You know that one. There's also needed a room for it to breathe. You already know that, so I'm not gonna go further into it. But I am gonna give at least one example of what cloning is. There's the famous example named Dolly and Molly. Now, if I'm not right about the names, I'm sorry about it. Because it's a long time ago I really heard the story and names aren't my strongest part. Okay? But the story is that this sheep, let's say it was Molly. This sheep, Molly, got its DNA extracted and inserted into this empty egg cell, which was again inserted inside her own womb, which helped producing the new sheep called Dolly. So the original sheep, Molly, gave birth to the sheep Dolly, which genetically wasn't its own child. It genetically was its own clone. But even with that kind of genetics, due to mutations, activation of genes, and so on and so forth, I'm not really sure how much of this you actually get. The assurance of or the identity, the shared DNA codes, gene codes, would only be around, I think I remember it was around 80% or so, but it's still pretty high for individuals. Now, while I'm rambling about this, you can easily say, oh, that's not really, oh, it sounds easy. Okay. First off, don't do this at home. I don't encourage you at all. Because there are consequences. It is because almost worldwide it isn't ethically legal to make a fully developed clone. In case point, as long as the individual is just a small collection of cells, aka if we say the Dolly example, still a little fetus and not a fully developed lamb, it's still legal. But for that, there's a reason why. Because the inserted cell still has a date. Because through the process of mating, the new cells that are mixed are actually mixed two parts. That's mostly the easiest part. The center DNA from the mother and the center DNA from the father, you know the mix. So that can be mixed rightfully and make a new individual. And trust me, if you start studying what I have studied, you can come up with just as much information, if not more. The matter of fact is that during a lifetime, genes can be activated and deactivated. Some genes are actually good. Other genes code for proteins that are rather harmless. But for a healthy human being, most of the genes that are deactivated are actually the harmful ones. So I think it's around only 50% of the human genome, aka the human genes, that are actually active and in use. Actually, I think it's fewer than them that are actually useful. The other ones is just introns, aka unuseful genes. And I can't really say that this is going to be one thing that you'll understand, but I'm still gonna do my best here. But during a lifetime, genes can be mutated, aka bases that are switched through, not like X-Men mutations. This is just maybe a codes that are copied a short tandem repeat or a short nuclear repeat, I think. Yeah, repeat. Yep. No. Or there's a I remember again. There can either be a short tandem repeat, aka a repeatance of a shorter code length, leading to a smaller new amount of DNA being produced, if lucky enough, or a single nuclear polymorphism, aka SNPs, if you speak about it, which only allows one single nucleic acid to be switched around for another one. So, but the other thing is that genes can also be activated through this. Some of them actually rather harmful. So a younger individual going through with the mutations that the older one can have in such a young state can still be really, really harmful for a younger individual, which is actually also one of the great debates for the ethics of this subject. For an ethical point for this is that they can reawaken some of the other extincted species on Earth. I'll get on that one. And I'll get on that one now, because that's actually the mammoth. The mammoth, as you might have seen somewhere, the mammoth have been tried to be cloned with an elephant. I haven't really seen enough material or enough results from this one so I can analyze it, but I can still do my best about it. Because as far as I get from this, they did the same process as they did with the other. They found a mosquito encased in, is it raw you call it? Raw? Never mind. The sappy thing from the trees. Yes. Encased in that, but with the DNA of the mammoth inside. One thing is that the DNA could be damaged during the long time it has been encased. Another thing is that it could also be mixed with the DNA of the mosquito. So itself, that's a pretty damn long sorting process already. But another thing is that as long time ago as it have been for mammoth to have existed, the codes have been mutated so many times. I know I've been talking about mutations as being activating harmful genes, but actually in some cases mutations can actually also activate some good genes, but the mutations itself is inherited only as long as it happens in the sexual cells. Yeah, I'm really sexual right now. I'm not horny, I'm just talking biology and biotechnology, okay? So try to follow. So, but through that time, it can still have gotten such a long way since the time when the mammoth have its part. So it's hard to actually. I can imagine that it's really hard to find a acceptor of this gene that can actually be appropriate enough for this mammoth gene, and also for let's say a volunteer to be this mammoth's mother. I know there's a Danish term for this kind of thing, rumour, but as of right now, I don't really know the English term for it. I'm gonna write it down to you, okay? So that have been going on. It have been going on since I think it was 2007 where it started. And funny enough, I haven't really heard anything new from it. So maybe the damages from time and the age of the DNA sample got up with the young one and sadly didn't have anymore. Oh yeah, that's one thing I didn't mention about it. The project happened in a land where these ethics didn't apply. I'm not saying which country, and I think you wouldn't be able to guess which one it is. Maybe not, because I'm also a little unsure about it, so I'm not gonna name any. But the ethics that are implied that cloning is okay as long as it doesn't result in a fully developed being, individual, it didn't apply in this country. So they were actually able to produce this individual. Unfortunately, I'm not really sure how well it got so far. So I can't really say anything new about it. But this now to the part that I actually kinda wanted to talk about, because I got inspired to do this through this thing. And one of the things I'm gonna argue con these arguments for. Now, how do people see cloning? Well, anyone who have seen any sci-fi or something like that has the idea that clones are designed to be completely genetically and physically and psychologically identical to its host, aka the one who donated the DNA, not the one who carried it, so to speak, but identical, genetically identical, so-called isophone, or isogenetic, iso individuals maybe, that could be a good term, but and it's a lot of those people also see if they ever get through with it, the clones will take over us all, exchange themselves with us, and we're gonna be their slaves while they live our lives. That's not exactly how it's gonna happen. Because one thing, yes, inheritment is a factor here. Okay? What they get from you is genetics. And if the cell structure is as well placed as well as your own, there is a chance that they can be identical to you with around 50 to 80%, I think. Now, around that part. But that's only genetical. That's only genetical. As I said before, there can also be activated and deactivated codes. One of the deactivated codes that you can have inherited from, say, your uncle on your father's side could be a larger nose. Maybe your clone has the activated gene of that exact gene. So your clone actually has a larger nose than yourself. That is one part of it. Another part is that this argument is based on the typical inheritment contra environment, which have been going on all the way since the fairy tale time. So I can name a couple. I can name a lot about that. So I can say this way. I also studied psychology a bit while in high school, so I could talk a bit about this. One thing is the genetics, aka if you see about the genetics and how it affects the psychology of the individual, it might say, okay, this gene produces this protein, this produces this enzyme or this receptor in the brain, which either produces or are more affected towards another hormone or signal, another signal like dopamine, serotonin, neuroadrenaline, signal stuffs like that, signal atoms like that, signal molecules like that. There you go. That's the psychology. That's the genetics of the psychology. So that way around, maybe it could have been, but there's still something called environment. Environment also have a big effect upon the human individual development. One thing is the typical Freud psychology, which I basically hate to analyze with because it's so fucking sexist and so fucking dated. But there's still some truth to it. Like say, if the kid has problems in the earliest part of life, say around with mother or just in general, yeah, around the mother, it's the best way to go because there's still the symbiotic even after the birth. Let's say around there, it can still produce problems, and according to Freud psychology, that would induce to a much more greedy personality. Again, according to Freud psychology. And stuff like that. But also there's the thing in your childhood, but there's also situations which you have experienced both good and bad, could have changed you in one direction or another. So in the case of this topic, we can say that, let's say that you as a child had an experience where you learned that licorice was made on horse blood. Then you would develop through psychology that it's bad. Then you maybe would develop through psychology. Let me rephrase that. Maybe through psychology, you would we train your head to think, it's bad for the horse, don't eat it, you don't like it, so you don't like it anymore. Although your clone, however, will be able to like it. That's again the inheritment contra environment. And that is really important factors to think about. And actually the part where I started to think like this really again happened while I played one of my favorite games of all time, Tales of the Abyss. I'm not gonna spoil which characters in question, but here we have perfect examples of clones and of how clones look at the world, how clones look at the original, how the original look at the clone. Because through the host, through the original, we see that he lost everything. He lost his family, he lost his inheritment, he lost everything to the clone. But in fact, the clone was only placed in the environment, so he was trained up to be like him. If he was placed in any other environment, he would have been trained to be something else. If he was placed in a small village, he would maybe have become a farmer. If he was placed in a dojo, he would perhaps have become a fighter. Stuff like that. One thing you have to think about is what you inherit. Not just inherit via genetics, but also from your primary state, but what you inherit from everything else that you experience is not genetics, it's not inheritment, that's environment. And now I really think that I got off track with the topic, and I don't know how much of this you actually got, but if I ever get news about this again, I might keep infoing on this, because there's actually some big news about this. There's big viewpoints about it, big ethical debates about this. There's still, although you haven't heard as much about the debatable of this, it's still a really debatable, a really big topic. Now, once again, I am not encouraging any of you to try this. This is for professionals. This is for people who really know what they do. No, not just know. They know what they do. They know what they don't do. They know the consequences. They know they know what they will gain. They know the problems. They know the ethics. They know everything about what is to do and what is not to do. What's to say, what's to do, what's to process with, what to get away with, what to say. This is not just an easy process, and I have tried processing it to you to the best in the best method possible. I don't know how many of you that can actually follow this, but as my experience go, I can't really teach you anything more about this topic, because that actually require me to go reading more again, and it require you starting reading about this. Not just genetics. I talk about biotechnology. I talk about how cells work inside of themselves. I talk about how cells work between themselves. I talk about how cells get influenced by other environmental and and matter things, matter requirements. I don't really got the word right now, but I've studied for this a really long time. I've read book and book again, and I've tried to talk to you about in the best way I can. Maybe you don't understand it. That's perfectly fine with me. If it have sounded like I've been ranting right now, I'm terribly sorry about it, but I just don't want you to try this at home. Okay? Don't try this at home. I've been talking about this. You can think a little bit about this right now. What are your viewpoints about this matter? What are your viewpoints about the experimentation into this matter? What are your viewpoints upon the ethics? What are your viewpoints? What are your points in the debate of this subject matter? I really want to know what's your point of view. How do you think about this? What do you think about it? Because it is actually, as I said before, in the cliff between people that knowledge is gained the best. I can talk about this another time, but remember this: it's always in the cliff between people that the most knowledge is gained.